my honor to be able to share some insights on the Haggadah as part of our Shul's second Many Voices, One Haggadah series. During the next number of days, you will, God willing, be receiving different videos exposing you to the diversity of thought and the wonderful talent that we enjoy at Young Israel of Century City, helping you prepare for your Siddurim. In this presentation, I've been asked to focus on the very first act that we do at Seder, namely Kadesh or Kiddush. Every Shabbat and every Yom Tov we recite Kiddush, but on Pesach at the Seder, Kiddush is more than just a sanctification of the holiday. It also serves as the first of the 4 special cups of wine that we drink, demonstrating our appreciation for all of the miracles that happened to us as we were freed from slavery in Mitzrayim. I thought it therefore behooves us to pay attention to some fascinating halakhic questions that are involved in this Kiddush, and to try to elicit some important lessons that they offer us. The first question the observant student notices is that something is missing even before Kiddush begins. Judaism always dictates that mitzvot are introduced by a bracha. Before we light the menorah on Hanukkah, we recite brachot. Before we read the Megillah on Purim, we recite brachot. Before we light Shabbat candles, there is a bracha, etc., etc. But where is the bracha tonight for the recitation of the Haggadah, the main mitzvah of Seder night, the mitzvah of Tzipur Yitziat Mitzrayim, of recounting the story of Exodus from Egypt? 2 Rishonim, 2 medieval halachists, the French 14th century Rabbeinu Yerucham, and the preeminent expert on Jewish liturgy, the Spanish 13th century Avudraham, both suggest that one not need look further than Kiddush for our answer. They argue that Kiddush at Seder serves as the bracha for the Haggadah as well. They note that when we say the words in Kiddush at Seder, Zecher Liyitziat Mitzrayim, in memory of the Exodus from Egypt, we are introducing the entire Haggadah with this bracha. But this isn't the only bracha that appears to be missing at the Seder. The Mishnah in Masechet Brachot, Perek Tes, Mishnah Aleph states that one should always make a bracha of Sha'asa Nisim La'avosenu B'makom Hazeh, that God performed a miracle at this spot for our forefathers when we visit a place where a miracle occurred. The Talmud wonders, how do we know that this is the law? And it answers that Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, taught it to us when he declared in Shmot, Perik Yud Ches, Pasuk Yud, the words, Baruch Hashem, Asher Hitzil Etchem Miyad Mitzrayim. Blessed be God who saved you from the hands of Egypt. Based on this statement of the Talmud, the 8th century Rav Achai Gaon, in his work, the She'iltos, notes that because of this Talmudic ruling, we say the blessing, She'asa Nisim La'avotenu, Bayamim Ha'im Basman Hazeh, on both Hanukkah and Purim. If this is correct that we say it on Hanukkah and Purim, one must wonder why we don't say this blessing at the Seder, together with Kiddush, when we clearly know that the whole source of this blessing was Yitro acknowledging the miracles of Exodus itself. Many have suggested that we actually do say this bracha, but it is placed at the end of the Magid, when we say the bracha of Go'al Yisrael, who freed Israel. In that blessing we say Asher Go'alanu v'Go'al es Avosenu miMitzrayim, who freed us and our fathers from Egypt. That sounds like the same bracha of She'asa Nisim La'avosenu Bayamim Ha'im Bazman Hazeh, who performed miracles for our forefathers in those days and today. And therefore, we really have said this bracha as well. But if this is correct, wonders the late encyclopedic genius Rav Menachem Kasher, why place this bracha at the end of the Haggadah and not at the beginning when we say Kiddush? On Hanukkah, we say this blessing of She'asa Nisim La'avosenu before we light the candles and not after. And on Purim, we said it before we began reading the Megillah, not after its completion. If that is so, then why, when it comes to Pesach, we don't say it at the beginning of the Seder at Kiddush, but we wait until the end of Magid? He suggests that we wait until the end of Magid because we have a principle, Maschil Begenus, Umesayim Bashevach. We must tell the story of Exodus by beginning with the story of shame and only end it with the story of praise. If we would place this bracha at the beginning, he argues, we would be putting the praise before recounting the negative element of the story. But why is this principle so crucial that we must begin with the negative elements of the story? I think we all understand that to honestly appreciate the gifts that we are given, we must sometimes first experience the loss of those very gifts. Only when we really appreciate how blessed we are can we sing a song of gratitude. To conclude, let's note one textual point in the Kiddush. Jewish liturgy usually is worded in the plural. For example, in the Amidah and Yom Tov, we say, Ata v'chartanu mikol ha'amim. You have chosen us from among all peoples. When it comes to Yom Tov Kiddush, suddenly we change and we speak in the singular. Asher bocharbanu mikol v'romemanu mikol lashon. Who has chosen us from among all people and has raised us above all tongue. The commentator Iyun Tfilah suggests that in the Amidah we are recalling history. We are recounting the fact that we became the chosen people because all of the other nations refused to accept the Torah. This is reflected in the use of the word amim in the plural instead of am in the singular. Kiddush, however, serves a totally different purpose. Kiddush is not a historic recounting. Rather, it is a philosophical declaration. It is contrasting the Jewish people on a religious level from the non-Jewish world. It honestly doesn't matter which religion we are discussing. We are different from each and every religion because of our commitment to the concept of Kedusha, which is uniquely Jewish. Perhaps an essential message of the Haggadah is this very point. As we begin to recite the Haggadah, we declare that we are not only going to recount history tonight, we are also going to make the theological declaration that we appreciate that our mission in this world is to bring Kedusha into everything we do. Allow me to conclude by sharing a story and an observation that the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs notes in his masterful Haggadah. Rabbi Sachs recounts, in the Kovna ghetto in the early 1940s, an extraordinary scene took place one morning in the makeshift shul. The Jews in the ghetto had begun to realize their fate. They knew that none of them would escape. At Shacharit that day, the Chazan was an old, pious Jew. When he came to the blessing, Shelo Asani Oved, thanking God for not having made us slaves, he turned to the Kehillah, the congregation, and he said, I cannot say this bracha. How can I thank Hashem for my freedom when I'm now a prisoner facing death? Only a madman could say this now. Some of the members of the Kehillah turned to the Rav present and asked him for his advice. Could a Jew in the Kovna ghetto pronounce the blessing thanking God for not having made him a slave? The rabbi replied very simply, Heaven forbid that we should abolish the blessing now. Our enemies wish to make us their slaves. But though they control our bodies, they do not own our souls. By making this blessing, we show that even here in Kovna ghetto, we still see ourselves as free men, temporarily in captivity, awaiting God's redemption. Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livrocha, noted that the rabbi in the Kovna ghetto taught us a very important lesson. God has chosen only one dwelling place in this finite physical universe, and that is the human heart. Whenever we banish God from the human heart, tragic things happen. When rulers set themselves in place of God, they begin by taking other people's freedom, and they end by taking other people's lives. There is a direct line from tyranny to idolatry to bloodshed. Our greatest defense is the knowledge that above all earthly powers is the supreme king of all kings, Hashem himself, who has endowed all human beings with his image. Where was God in the Kovna ghetto? In the hearts of those who, though they were prisoners in the valley of the shadow of death, insisted on pronouncing a blessing as free human beings. Their story has no simple happy ending, but they left us with an immortal legacy. The knowledge that the human spirit cannot be killed, and that therefore freedom will always win in the final battle. When we recite Kiddush on Pesach night and we begin the Seder, let's remember this lesson, that the human spirit can never be extinguished. Wishing everyone a meaningful, enjoyable, and uplifting Chag Kasher V'Sameach.